Just let me know when you're ready. All right, it's 5:10. Let's call this committee of a whole meeting to an order. If we can all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Doing a roll call, Commissioner Lundin is gone. I believe he'll be joining us later. Is there any public comment tonight for the committee of a whole meeting? Hearing none, so we will move on to the first item of business, which is item E1, Dahlin Ave and Main Street intersection discussion. So for this one, we've talked a little bit about this. I think there is a little bit of concern over there. There's quite a bit of congestion when there's parking on the corner. So I guess I was hoping that we could talk a little bit about potential solutions if there are any. And I believe the business owner is here, and maybe we could just talk over some ideas that we might have. If you'd like to come up and say anything, or we can just discuss, or, yeah. If you could say your name and your address for the record, please.
My name is Amy Rockstead, and my store address?
Sure, yeah.
108 Main Street. So I am the business that's on the corner. I've been trying to just kind of pay attention to really how many of my customers actually park, like right on the corner in front of my store. And it's not, a lot of people don't park there,
Sure.
To be honest. Like if I'm there and the store is open, they'll park on the side, or they'll park across the street, or they'll park maybe at the DIY, right in front of the DIY. But I think people are actually a little bit apprehensive about parking right up to the corner of that intersection. The intersection is a crazy intersection.
It is. It's,
I mean, there's days that I'm just like, some of these semis that are pulling through here, I'm like, oh, man. But I think, to me, like, even when I am at the corner and depending on which way I'm going home, I might go left, I might go right. If I'm going left, yeah, you do have to creep up a tiny bit if there's cars parked. But I don't know, I guess I don't really feel like it's really any different than any other intersection.
sure. Okay, so I had compared it kind of like driving down in the cities. You have to creep, and you have to get used to that, but a lot of people here aren't used to that, and that's kind of my worry. I didn't know if maybe there was a solution we could come up with for, I would propose moving that yellow paint back like 15 feet, because then you can see a little bit better. And then I didn't know if maybe there was a solution where we could, give you another parking spot across the street where there's some grassy land. It looks like probably about 2 cars wide. If we just put class 5 there and use that, you could use that as parking for 2 stalls, even if you lose one. I didn't know if that was something that maybe could be potential. Yeah, I didn't know if you're totally opposed to.
I mean, and I think the other thing is to consider too is the biggest, like, on a typical non-holiday time period, it's not like I have
Right.
20 customers in the store at the same time. So I think that's the other thing too, I don't know, it's not like you can control that portion of it at all. But yeah, I mean, I think that's feasible for that.
Okay.
So people are parking over there.
Right.
Already, I mean, the church parks there, so I think it's just kind of, if people see that, oh, this looks like a parking spot, they will park over there, so. I don't know if 15 feet would really help,
Okay.
Because we did get comments every once in a while right after we moved in, about not being able to that spot being very hard to see. But it was also, like, if my husband was there, he had his big pickup truck and his big trailer, and, the work vans and stuff were parked there. That's different. There's not typically big vehicles that are sitting there now,
Sure.
so
Okay.
I'm open. I don't want anyone to get hurt.
Right. Sure. So I was just thinking, the 15 or 20 feet would basically keep one vehicle a little bit, you could see a little bit better. I think it's I think it's a fair solution, but I don't know if we can do that as a city. You know, that little grassy area on the west side of the road. It looks like there's a tree and then there's some gravel. It's probably about 20 feet wide, so 2 vehicles per se. I don't know if that's something that we could, you know, get some gravel and throw it out there, and if that's a potential option.
Jason, do you know off the top of your head where that,
Are we talking the west side of Dolan?
Yes.
Yeah.
Where gravel already is?
Yes, if we just
From
extend
moving it
that
closer.
gravel.
Extend it a little closer to,
There's a
Main
tree
Street.
there that would be your limiting, and it's,
I mean, I guess, you know, I had just pulled up Street View there. So we already, you know, have a kind of you don't want people parking or parallel parking or whatever right up in front of a stop sign as it is. So the distance that it currently is back is about as close as we want vehicles perpendicularly parking from a stop sign as it is. There's also full height curb back to where it currently is and a catch basin. So if we tried to extend it at all there, we'd have to redo the catch basin casting and re-pour the curb to make it, you know, mountable. So I guess none of those, I guess, are, you know, I guess recommended by, you know, how that intersection would function or how cars would back up with vehicles trying to park there. I've kind of driven this a couple times since we've talked about it, and, you know, admittedly, this is exactly the same type of, you know, the building's pushed up against the walk, just like the rest of downtown. Well, admittedly, the rest of downtown has the curb bump outs.
right.
The crosswalks to be pushed out further. So, I mean, looking at it, I'd almost recommend, if we're really gonna go after kind of making that visibility improved, would be to put a bump out on either side of that north side of Main Street, either side of Dolan, to get the crosswalk pushed out like they are on the rest of the Main Street, you know, drag. And that'd make the stop bar push out that much further too, and it'd pretty much function the same as the 3 other intersections right through town here with the crosswalk being pushed out further. You know, right now, that creeping out topic, you know, doesn't cause much of a problem in my mind because the vehicle lane is that much further over, because there is that, you know, parking lane basically, so you don't, you know, as you're creeping over the crosswalk right now, you're not actually nosing into a drive lane, it's just kind of the parking lane. So, you know, again, I don't think it functionally is deficient right now, you know, for just how other intersections like it function, but, you know, a full improvement, I guess, in my mind, would be to make it kind of mimic at least the bump outs, you know, down through Main Street here. Admittedly, that'd probably be the costliest option, because we'd be rebuilding a bunch of curb and moving crosswalks and ped ramps, but, you know, that would definitely get the vehicles to be pushed out further and be able to see that much better.
Do you know when the next reconstruct or mill and overlay on something like that is? I mean, maybe that's something in a couple of years we could address when it makes more fiscal sense?
I don't know.
Okay.
When we're gonna be back there.
Do you know when we were there last, roughly?
Honestly, I don't.
Okay,
I'm blanking. I can pull up, I'll try and dig it up here, but, thinking of the condition of the road, I don't think it's, you know, terribly soon that we'll be doing a mill and overlay. You know, maybe a seal coat's coming, or we could still tie it to a project, but, you know, redoing a ped ramp is kind of gonna be, you know, its own thing no matter when we're doing it.
okay. Do you have any other recommendations or ideas based on the aerial? The biggest problem I see is when you're on Dolan and you're heading south and you're taking a left or a right, and your traffic is at your left and you can't see what's coming.
Right.
And it's not all the time, definitely not all the time, but I guess maybe it was just the holiday season, it was pretty busy there. I drive through there every day and it's like, man, reminds me of driving the cities, you know, which is fine, but,
I mean, it is partly, you know, how that zoning and setbacks is to make that the kind of downtown corridor feel, which is how cities are set up, so that does
Right.
make sense. But, yeah, I mean, that exact southbound vehicle trying to turn either way, having those bump outs to give them that much more distance to pull out, not feel like they're creeping out in front of a crosswalk would be the specific fix, I think, in my mind, not having cars parked further back, specifically, but, you know, for a temporary thing, you know, we could think about just even painting a bump out, like for a visible, make that vehicle that's coming and creeping out feel like they're not pulling out into a drive lane of traffic.
Okay,
That, I mean, it wouldn't function as a crosswalk, bump out, like the crosswalk itself would still sit where it is, but it'd just be more of a visual. And again, with the winter, we wouldn't really be able to paint it until next summer anyway, but, I don't know that that would accomplish much aside from those southbound vehicles feeling like they aren't creeping out into oncoming traffic while they're trying to see a little better, but, other than that, you know, if the consensus is have people stop 10, 15 feet further back from the intersection has the feel that it's gonna improve visibility, you know, I mean, you can certainly just extend that yellow paint if everybody's okay with it, but I guess that's about all I would recommend at this point.
okay.
So I have a question. Ms. Roxette, does anyone ask you for handicap parking?
I have two doors, so I have a door on the side and then a door in the front, so if they've got two options, and the handicap ramp is on the corner.
This is one thing, if we were to make a handicap stall along the street,
In the
that
corner?
doesn't get used all the time.
Okay,
But it would be used when it's needed. But then it would remain no vehicles most of the time.
I like that idea,
I do too.
yeah. Jeff?
Yeah, that's fine.
I think that's a good idea. Shucks.
And maybe paint some lines this spring when they're out.
Yeah, kind of like we did with the lane narrowing on Dogwood. You give that feel that it's, you know, okay. Yeah, if you would be okay with the handicap, I think that's a good idea because there's no handicap there anyways, so, okay. That's a good solution. I think that works. Thank you for coming in. Hopefully it was painless.
We'll have Public Works work on that.
Okay,
We'll probably end up doing an install in the sidewalk, but we'll mark it all out. We'll use engineering as assistance, make sure we get it in the right spot.
okay, sounds great. Does that sound okay, Jason?
Sure, it's not really gonna have legal pedway, ramps and things tied to the location of it, but, if it was the difference of, they would have been able to park anywhere they wanted anyway, and there wasn't a handicap stall, I guess I can't see it as a worse thing, or I guess liability-wise, getting them to the ped ramp.
Well, I can tell you, my dad is handicapped, and he's a double amputee, and we actually prefer when you can park right next to the curb, because your ramp literally comes down on the curb. You don't have to mess with the ramp, you don't have to worry the ramp is shoveled, it just goes right on the curb, so. Right,
Full height.
yeah, right, it goes right on it for
There is
most
a-
vans.
There is a ped ramp, though, at the corner intersection, so it'd be the first stall to that.
Right,
If your door is on your driver's side, almost all of them are set up on the passenger side, because when you park, the passenger side is already on the curb side. But there are some that have them in the rear. Handicap drivers, van drivers get very creative on how they have to park sometimes. So you might see vans parked backwards there if they have a rear exit, which goes right to yeah,
but, yep,
okay.
so,
All right, well, I think that's a good idea, and we'll go with that. Thank you. All right, so let's move on to E2, South Passage Railroad Crossing Surface Replacement.
I'll have Jason speak on this item. Thank you.
all right. Just like we did with the Main Street and Isanti Parkway, the railroad came to us and said, hey, this is your chance to have us fix the planking across your street. More or less do it now, or good luck getting us to come back, all unwritten statements.
Supposedly.
Right, and so we did that. The contract essentially looks the same of what they're mentioning now for South Passage, but it's essentially, they want the city to pay approximately half of the cost of their planking, but then the city has to run their own contract with their own contractor to provide traffic control and street patching and trail patching and curb repairs and whatever for the city's infrastructure side of things. We did the exact process on those other two. We designed it to state aid standards, so we were able to use state aid funds to cover that, plus the cost of that planking cost share, and it all worked out fine. Now they've come to us on our only other crossing we have in town, South Passage, and said they want to do that next year, and are we wanting to facilitate that, I guess. The cost for the planking is now $1,000 a foot, to just do the cost share part, which, there's 40 feet of planking, so that's $40,000 just as a force account agreement with the railroad. And then we would still have to create state aid level plans, to be able to use state aid funds on the traffic control and the street patching part of the work to be able to fund the project that way. And so, I mean, ballpark estimate with engineering and testing fees, I'm guessing it's somewhere in that $50,000 cost to get that plan to meet state standards to be able to have it covered by state aid funds, which would put us at about a $90,000 for a project cost, but it would be 100% state aid fundable.
So I have a couple questions on that, if you don't mind. When you get state aid funding for something like that, and it needs to be replaced again in, say, 20 years, are you state aid eligible again, or is it only a one-time per?
Yeah, so it's, state aid funds do have the life expectancy as the gap between each time you can use the funds for something. And so, 20 years or whatever would be, that cycle, and then if it's due, its life expectancy is expired, now we can use funds again. So, yes.
Okay. So I remember we had talked about this, and this was it just last year that was done, or was that 2 years ago?
2 years ago, we did the other two crossings.
Okay, and at that time, right, I wasn't sure if it was last year or 2 years, time flies, but at that time, we had said that we went and looked at it and it wasn't bad, it needed like one little pothole patched, and so I'm curious now how it's already needing some sort of repair, and I know, to me, I think that whole road needs to be widened, so I don't know if that's up for any work anytime soon, or if we can kind of pool that together and get state aid funds on all of it in one shot, so you're only paying one engineering fee, or, I guess.
So yes, that was that pothole on it. Actually, I drove there with Matt last Tuesday to go look and see that it is still fixed, and it is still fixed. The patch is in that concrete planking and looks reasonably fine. We have identified South Passage as more or less totally failed. One of the items for, budgeting on, the long term was doing a full reconstruction of South Passage all the way from Whiskey east to the tracks, if not all the way, coming up sooner rather than later.
Okay.
At which point we would be looking at using state aid funds and, whether widening it, specifically we'd have to widen it at least to state aid width requirements. I don't believe the plan was to convert it to curb and guttered street, but, it might need to be widened just to have the state aid minimum requirements met. So right now, I believe we're moving that to, within the next couple of years, we're
Okay.
recommending getting after that because it is pretty crumbled apart. It's just been smooth. However, it's staying smooth. We're keeping our fingers crossed it stays that way, but it's alligator cracked all over the place. So, in the end, I don't know that we'd really be able to tie, just because the railroad is very hard to coordinate timing with, because they basically, even on these projects that we did, they were like, we'll tell you when we're coming and you have somebody lined up ready. And we luckily had a contractor that was super agreeable and was literally left hanging for like 2 months, and then they said, we're coming, and he's like, I'm there. And it got done, like, you know, coordination looked awesome, but that was because we had a contractor that was able to drop everything and show up. If we tried to coordinate a full-on project with that, and the railroad isn't fitting our timelines, it could really jam up closure times and when we're needing to do work versus when they want to. So I'd see it as a good thing to have only had to have the road closed for the crossing work, and then have that complete, so then when it's time to do the road, we only have to go up to either side and have, you know, total control over our restriction, but,
But there's a cost to that. Yeah.
to run 2 plan sets, you know, in the end, this plan set is not gonna be it's gonna be more or less a 3-page plan set. You know, 1-page figure of what needs to be done in a detour plan, but we'd need the detour plan, a separate detour plan anyway for the South Passage project, because we would have to run a detour on one side of the tracks versus the other, you know, as we have to do our work, so. Admittedly, there would be some savings to try and do one full project, but construction schedule-wise, I don't know if it's gonna have an added value, you know, to try to do that. I guess on the idea of trying to move up South Passage to hit this session, you know, that'd be a whole funding topic, but our state aid advance funds that we're needing to advance are getting kind of maxed out, and I don't know, and maybe it's a Mike question on whether trying to move that project up makes sense, as opposed to, you know, trying to work out when the railroad might come back in the future to do the actual planking work, you know. We can certainly ask them, but.
Okay, so the railroad share of that is essentially $40,000 is what they're contributing to us. So they're offering us $40,000 essentially towards all the project cost. If you said that's a cost share and it's roughly $40,000 for the city of Isani for the planking, so they're $40,000 on their end, it's simple terms.
Right, sure, but they exclusively do their own planking. We're not allowed to contract that out or do anything with it. We're not allowed to touch it. They're in charge of it. And so, I mean, in a way, I guess, you know, they're investing $40,000 into the crossing, but they are the ones that do the work, and we have to pay them.
So eventually they're gonna have to replace it one way or the other, because eventually it'll degrade to a point where it's not safe for the train too. So it's not like they have all the negotiation power.
Well, so their way of thinking is, well, if it fails to the point of failure and you guys aren't willing to fix your road, we'll barricade off the road and the crossing doesn't exist anymore. And then we'll fix the tracks however we feel we need to fix them. We don't need planking, is how they say it.
And the state allows them to do that?
Well, because of how, whatever contracts exist for who has jurisdiction over a crossing, almost all of them are, the railroad has allowed the city or entity to cross their tracks, because they were there first. And so, they basically say, well, we're allowing you to do that, but if you don't keep your stuff up to snuff, then we don't have to leave it open.
Okay.
We can argue, you know.
Yeah, right.
with them, but,
So how bad is the crossing actually? Because I don't think it's bad personally, but I'm not an engineer. So I mean, I think it's probably got at least 5 more years easy in it. So
So, you know, obviously with that pothole, you know, whether that thing pops back out any given time, it could be pretty hazardous. It's a pretty big one, you know, that was why you guys all brought it up the first time they came. And we were like, why aren't you fixing that one? And they were admittedly saying, well, those planks aren't as old. They were looking at age. And I agree that if that pothole didn't exist, I would say, yeah, they're reasonably good. You know, one of those planks is the plank that went in for our trail, that went in just 10 years ago-ish. And so the trail plank, you know, the 8-foot wide planking, the concrete block, that's where the trail crosses behind the arms. I mean, that's reasonably new. But it's one of those, if they're in there messing around, is it worth not doing one versus the other, and would they even consider that? So, in the end, our road is in worse shape than the plank, I'd say.
Right.
But, you know, we're targeting fixing the road, you know, and so if we're gonna fix the road in the next few years, it wouldn't be great to fix our road and then the planks get fixed the following year, or whenever the railroad does come back, you know, to do theirs, so, you know.
I guess I think that we should try and talk to them and tell them we're planning on doing this road in 2026, 2027 or whatever, and see if they'll work with us on that. But that's just my opinion.
I'm not up on my railroad history, but when the railroads went in, do you think the original agreement was with the federal government of where they went? And did they have to have separate agreements with counties or townships, or was it with just the state?
Yeah, I don't know, I do know that they have different agreements for each entity, and so, you know, definitely, you know, counties have different agreements with them than cities do for those streets.
I'd like to see that agreement before I
Actually,
make sure we don't have an ace in a hole somewhere.
no, sure, I think we can dig that out, because I think the railroad, we kinda had this discussion at one point, and they were the ones saying, well, actually, we don't even find that there's an agreement for this road even exist, on South Passage.
Okay,
So they're like, this road, this crossing doesn't even have an agreement to exist.
okay.
And so that was worse for us. At least if there was an agreement, then they have to work with us. So South Passage specifically, and it might have been back when we had our trail go in, that they had dug that deep and they were like, this one's weird because I don't even know that this is supposed to exist.
So what you're saying is that they could take a position of, well, you're paying for the whole improvement because,
It's not supposed to be a crossing. So, yeah, so the conversation, I remember the conversation back when our trail was happening, and they were kind of acting like, well, we should get this worked out, and they were like, well, maybe at another time, and I wasn't about to push for it. And so, that might be, you know, part of the cleaning this up as well, but I guess it depends on which path you guys would want to go down, so.
how easy is it for you to just take a quick look at that agreement that maybe the county and the railroad has? Would you have to go through the railroad to do it, or would you be able to do it through the county, so?
To find out what the county and railroads agreement is?
Yes,
I mean, we can ask the county, you know, what theirs is, but, you know, they just did, or they're doing theirs, they did a couple last year along, you know, right after we were doing ours, so, you know, they were just doing the exact same, agreement, I guess.
Sure.
Or contract, so,
Councilmember Heeman, are you maybe suggesting that if the city of Isani doesn't have an agreement with the railroad, that maybe the county does for that intersection? Is that what you're saying?
no, I'm just going back, well, the railroad is saying they're putting the city in the spot or anybody who has a intersection across their railroad. And they're saying this is the way it is. Has anybody ever looked at the agreement and actually seen if that really is the way it is, that, you know, we pay half? Or was there something in the agreement that says cities have the right to expand and you'll maintain intersections? I don't know.
It would be interesting, because if you think about it, why are they coming to us with a cost share when they could just throw all the cost on us? So maybe there is something in there that,
Right.
that says, you know, and it just does, yeah, it doesn't seem right to, I mean, there's a lot of other cities that do it, they'll just hear the word state aid money and they'll think it's free money and they'll just take it now, take it, take it, take it. But I think if we strategically think about it, it might not be the taxpayers that pay for it, it might be the railroad. Is that kind of where you're going?
Yes, and looking at this, we're pretty much paying the whole thing. There's
Yeah.
no way it's $1,000 a foot for those concrete beams. There's just no way.
Right.
So they're just upping the cost of those beams, and they're pretty much getting a free ride, and we're paying 50% of what they say it is. But I know we're in a spot,
yeah, no, I mean, admittedly, you know, even our project 2 years ago, you know, we only paid $800 a foot. So
Sure.
it come up with the new price per foot, that's their planking. You know, and admittedly, it's installed and delivered in the whole deal, you know, but yeah, they're the ones coming up with what they say the cost is to put it in. You know, and they're not giving us, you know, any say whatsoever on that. But no, you know, like I say, I believe they at least have the agreements from Main Street and, Sandy Parkway, and we can at least go look at what those are written as. Like I say, I don't believe we even have one for the other one, so I don't know how far we wanna go down that path, but,
Sure.
but I believe, you know, we can get the two that we already did and see how those are worded.
Yeah, just take a quick peek
I
at them.
bel- Yeah, we can at least do that, and talk about the year that we're looking at doing South Passage and see if they're open to moving to that year. I think that probably makes the most sense if they're willing to do that, because aside from worrying about the pothole popping out, you know, I don't believe it's in that bad a shape, so.
I do have a question on the pothole. Do you know, did this hot patch that in general? Is there any way that if it pops out again, we could put rebar in there? To, you know, join it to what's there? Would the railroad be pissed about that, or how would that
Yeah,
work?
they don't want us touching their planking.
But they let us patch it.
No, I believe they actually sent somebody to go do it. I think when it got brought up that time, and we relayed it to this guy managing these projects and the rail master, I think they got somebody out there within a couple days and patched that.
So if it happened again, they would probably do the same thing.
Yeah, well, especially if it happened again, they'd be like, well, we told you we wanted to replace this plank.
But they'd probably
But they
still,
probably would still just hot patch it. But yeah, you know, they would wanna be the ones messing with their planks.
okay.
Just to follow up, so the agreements that you're gonna look at for those two railroad crossings, are they the original agreement that the railroad had with the county back when they laid the railroad line? That's the one I'm,
With the city, for the city's road crossings, is our two crossings that I'm talking about. We can ask the county for their
original.
county road, 5 crossing as well.
Are you saying it would have been county before it was city? So there would have been an
Well,
agreement with the,
Somebody had to have an agreement when they put them tracks in. I mean, the original agreement is what they have to abide by, so whatever year that railroad went in, back in
oof,
the
1800s?
late 1800s, the agreement the railroad had with the county or the townships, or is it, that's why I asked, was it a federal agreement or a state agreement, or was it individual county agreements? Maybe there was something in the original agreement that we could put as many crossings as we wanted or needed within reason. I have no idea.
Sure, yeah, I mean, I hate to say that I'm too expensive to do all this digging for you, but
Right.
I can dig as much as you want,
Yeah,
but
speaking of the expensive thing, you said that the engineering report would be 3 pages, but it's gonna be 50 grand.
no, the construction of the entire project with testing, with engineering. with
Okay.
the contractor doing the traffic control, the signage, the ripping out, the replacing, all the costs, not my
Okay,
fee.
okay, because you said 50, and I was like, well, is
Yeah,
that
no.
10,000? Okay,
Yeah, no.
okay,
Admittedly, to get them to state aid level plans and all the paperwork and all the stuff we'd have to do, I mean, my fees would still, maybe be like 10 grand, but not 50.
okay.
You know, it's, yeah, it's all just adds up to getting it to be a certain level of a plan set that the state will review and approve over just, putting an X on a map and saying, hey, contractor, close this and patch the road back in. We could go that way, but then we just can't use state aid funds to fund it, so that's kind of that.
Sure.
Well, it's up to you guys if we want to, we could just limit to them at 1 hour a time. If you can't get any headway in an hour, we'll just decide to do something different later or talk about it again.
I think that'd be better for city staff. That's more of an ordinance thing than an engineer thing, I feel like.
True.
So I
That is
think
true.
if city staff has time, that would be the best suited for that, maybe. Because it would be interesting to see, maybe we don't have to pay for any of it. Maybe they're legally obligated in the state or the county to do the planking on their own, because otherwise, why would they even offer a cost share? They have an incentive. There has to be some incentive there.
There has to be something. You would think when the railroad went in, they knew there would have to be roads that cross it, and they're just saying, no, we're a sovereign nation, and if you want to go across us, you pay.
Well, to be honest, I mean, that's kind of how they add the crossings, right? Like, that's what they have two agreements for Main Street and Isani Parkway, because when we added those crossings, they created that agreement when they put in their blanking at that time. So that's when they created an agreement for each new intersection. They were making the agreement with whatever entity was wanting to cross them. And so when the city came and said, hey, we want to cross the railroad tracks and we're going to call that Main Street right here. And they said, okay, well, we'll put in the planking, we'll do this, and here's the agreement we're all going to sign on how that intersection's going to be maintained. And that's how that became an agreement, like per crossing, not,
Which would oversee any agreements that they may have had earlier with. and-
yeah, and that's what I don't know, right. I'm just saying, that's where I know the current
Right.
ones are based on essentially when an individual crossing goes in is when they make an agreement for it. So prior to that, I don't know anything.
I can take a little bit of time and look into it too myself, and might be a really easy explanation for the whole thing.
So I have a devil's advocate question. We're talking about state aid funding, and I would assume that if the state spent, say, $2 million redoing South Passage, and we didn't do anything with the railroad crossing, and then the railroad decided to shut down South Passage, I would think the state would then step in and say, hey, we just spent all this money. You guys don't have jurisdiction in our state to shut down a road that we just paid for. Couldn't it work like that too, where we have the state behind the funding of it, so, and they're not gonna want a road to be shut down? Is that really far-fetched to think that you'd actually have a little more power once it is state aid funded to replace that whole road?
So, I mean, state aid is just an avenue for the city to have funds to repair their own streets.
Mm-hmm.
They don't exactly lay jurisdiction over any other entity on how our segments that we choose to use the funds on, you know, are
Okay,
functioning. Admittedly, though, they would probably try and be helpful. You know, if we were running into a significant problem on something like that, I think the state would try and help facilitate getting something maintained or repaired, but they certainly wouldn't back us saying, well, no, you're gonna do it all, you know, at your cost. And the railroad says, well, then we're gonna disconnect it. Well, the state would come in and be like, well, the agreement says whatever.
but there is no agreement.
Well, and even more so, we're probably gonna need to get one, and even more so, it'll probably be written as even more of the city's problem. But that's all, I mean, that's all they're all pretty much end up being written, so, it was just an interesting fact that they weren't able to find this one, 10 years ago or whatever.
Okay. Well, I guess I'd be fine with not doing anything with it anytime soon. It's not bad enough to be replaced, and I don't think we should be using taxpayer monies to replace something that's not bad, period. Whether it's state money, city money, doesn't really matter. So I guess I would be good with looking at it and seeing if we can, pool it together with another project, even though the timing might not be perfect. And if it's a reasonable request, like something like that, I don't think they can deny it, but I don't know what everybody else feels.
It is a reasonable request. I know they have a time schedule to do things, but if we have, you know, we want to improve that road in that area, we should be able to work together a little bit with them, a little bit better than just saying, do it now or forget it.
Yeah, I would see if they can work with us when we actually work on the road. So,
Sounds good to me.
So is that, I mean, that's the direction I should go back to them and say,
We're planning to,
interested in doing it right now, but we're planning to do it and I'll go look up the year and see if they'll schedule that with that.
right, yep, I think that would be fair. But before we offer to pay for half, I think we really should look at the language, because I think there's an incentive for them to come to us and say, hey, it'd be great if you guys would pay for half and we paid for half, because I'm thinking they know that there might be something in there that says that they're required to pay for it, and they want us to pay for it. There's always an incentive for business to try and save money, so the fact they're coming to us just makes me think that there's some sort of something that we have a legal backing for. So I would like to look into that before we even talk about the cost share side of it, if that makes sense.
And it makes me wonder even more, because every time you want to redo an intersection, they want an agreement. And why?
Exactly.
Because the original agreement should be fine. Whatever that may be.
Does
I
that,
don't know.
does that make any sense, Jason?
Well, sure, I mean, we can look
Okay.
into whatever you want.
Okay.
To be honest, I feel like my understanding has been in the past that they're trying to be, because they're trying to manage their own schedules and
Right.
they're trying to be cost participating even though they don't have to, and that they wanna facilitate this to happen.
Yep.
And it's like them being nice in their mind, even though it's forcing a cost onto us without much of a budgeting schedule ahead of time. But, you know, I believe they've come into these thinking that they're being nice by paying some of it. But
Right.
absolutely, it's worth digging into and seeing how the verbiage is, so.
Okay. Well, that sounds good. We can wrap up that item and move on to E3, Isani Community Center Internet discussion. So I was at an event there and like 5 people asked me if there was Wi-Fi. And I said, yeah, there's gotta be, right? Well, apparently there isn't Wi-Fi in the community center. I had no idea. I think Josie had said that we talked about this a handful of years ago. None of us were on council then, so I don't think we knew that there wasn't internet. But I think with the way that things are nowadays, I mean, people depend on the internet. You know, they had to figure out a way to get their slideshow because they didn't have it on their computer, it was on the web, you know, so I guess I would like to discuss options for that. I see there are some costs in there, and it was interesting to see the amount of money we spend on that place, which is, I mean, it's high, but it's not. So I did a little bit of math, and to cover all our costs, with the average of 20 rentals per month, which is what staff had said, it would be roughly $171 per rental for a fee. Obviously now, I believe we charge $50. I don't know that 171 is necessarily reasonable, but I think talking about a small increase in the rental cost to offset the Wi-Fi and maybe a few dollars of the other costs would be beneficial for us.
I have a couple questions before we even dig into this. Did you have cell service when you were in the community center?
Yep, yeah, so what they ended up doing was a hotspot off someone's
Right.
phone.
With all the new technology, I mean, even in another couple of years, they're gonna up those hotspot gigabytes, I'm sure, up way more. And I think we're chasing something that we won't even need in reality in just a few more years. Everybody has a cell phone and everybody gets pretty good internet speed, especially in our town. It seems like all the services, they're really fast speeds. I get 200 megabytes a second with T-Mobile. I don't know if I can see a need for this, unless we were doing a lot of business-type rentals, like a lot of businesses were using it for company functions or PowerPoint-type meetings where they needed heavy usage of the internet, but I don't know how often that happens. Staff might. I mean, what's staff's opinion on,
We certainly use it ourselves a few times a year for business meetings. I'm actually hosting a meeting for the city for ECDP next month at the Coburn's meeting room, just because we don't have Wi-Fi here, because we need it to be a hybrid meeting, so is what we require now, so we need a space for that. So I think it's something we've discussed before. We have the mayor's lunch in there, we host the State of the City there with the chamber and a few other events throughout the year for businesses. So I do think it limits the ability for that to be hosting meetings. We get a lot of businesses, Wolf River Electric, Quick Trip, they all do host business meetings there on a regular basis throughout the year.
sure. How many feet is the city hall to the community center? It can't be real far. Couldn't we put an external Wi-Fi antenna on the roof and then use city hall's Wi-Fi for the community center?
We don't have public Wi-Fi here either. When the internet was used in the library, they have had their own. But otherwise, besides, council's using it, yes, but we don't give it out to the public. If someone comes here, we say, please use your Wi-Fi or your hotspot. We don't give out those passwords to anyone, so it's a closed, secure network.
I think
Can you
it's,
split your Wi-Fi so you can have part of the Wi-Fi not being on the city's network? Is there a possibility of doing something like that?
Not that I'm aware of. 'Cause you're still gonna have that one central router point. So, and if I went to Midco and said, hey, we wanna have a second router for XYZ, they're gonna be like, well, that's a second service, here's your price.
correct.
They're, they,
I try to do that at my place. My garage is 150 feet from my house. And there's no way for them to possibly do it unless I run another line and pay another fee, even if I get another router, anything on my own, it's not possible. They make it hard so that they're smart. They wanna make twice the money if they can, so they make it that way.
How much a month were you saying?
Was it roughly $70 a month or 80?
$83.67 roughly with the estimated tax and fees.
And you had said that there's roughly 20 rentals per month, so you divide that per rental, that's roughly $4. So,
$4.18.
Oh, I thought I
So
heard
we
you
just
say,
were- We were recommending a $5 increase per.
I thought I heard you say a higher figure than that.
no, so.
That's not too bad.
No, what I had said was that if just looking at the cost of the community center in general, we would have to charge roughly $171 per rental to break even on that building. So right now, we're going in a deficit on that building, only charging for $50 per rental. So, I mean, obviously, I think it's a good service, and $50 is pretty cheap, but I was hoping that we could do the Wi-Fi and then, up the charge to like $70, so we're not going in the hole quite as much. It's still a good service, and I think that adding Wi-Fi will make it more usable for people. We might be able to get better smart security over there with the Wi-Fi, or who knows, I mean, there's all sorts of stuff that we could, use off that Wi-Fi other than just someone else needing it for an event.
So is it unlimited then for that price?
Yes.
Okay.
It's just like a home internet service, but I'm sure they can
Kinda
zone it
like
commercial.
T-Mobile's, it's unlimited, fast, okay.
Now, what company was that through? Does that say in here?
It's through CenturyLink is who is our provider here at City Hall.
Have we had a lot of problems with
No, we have Midco here.
Okay.
CenturyLink is,
We used to have CenturyLink,
Yeah.
but not any longer.
So the quote was from CenturyLink did we get a quote from Midco?
we did not.
Or T-Mobile? Do we use T-Mobile for city phones, or do we use Verizon?
Verizon.
Could we check there too, because
No.
they,
I didn't check Verizon.
okay. Because I know with T-Mobile, you can get home internet with your phone plan for like $40 a month. Now, do they need to know that it's a commercial building? I don't know.
Yeah, they do.
Okay,
They do, it's gonna be probably $70 a month through T-Mobile.
okay. Well, I would
It can
prefer,
be spotty.
well, CenturyLink's really spotty in the city, so,
I had them for many years. I had 20 megabytes a second, I think, with them. And I was the last person on the line. So I was the last house, so everybody got their service before me, and I still had pretty good luck with them. I only switched because I wanted higher speed.
Right.
So I went T-Mobile's.
When we had it, we mainly switched for speed, but also was for the reliability of it. We did have drop and I would know every time it dropped because I got called by our alarm system because that takes a signal. So that's why we at City Hall, but I don't think that would be an issue at the community center, but that's why we switched here.
What kind of speed is CenturyLink saying they can provide for the community center? Because if their maximum was 20 here in town,
unless you pay for a separate line to be ran, it was like $100,000 that they wanted to charge us to have faster internet, so we switched.
We can
Really?
get the numbers for Midco as well and let you know what the differences are.
okay. Because I'm worried if it is only 20 and you have a room full of people and a bunch of them start using the Wi-Fi there, that the main reason they need it for all of a sudden isn't fast enough.
And so throughout doing this, one of the things we did want you to consider was just that, like Luke had mentioned, or Mayor Merrill has mentioned, that we are in a deficit every year and we haven't increased the cost of renting it since 2013 that we're aware of. We don't know when the last time it was, but at least 2013. And so we do just feel it's our recommendation that we should be increasing the rates at least at some interval here. We do get a lot of nonprofit, well, we do get some nonprofits to roughly a month renting, and that's a $25 fee. $50 for 4-hour rentals for less than 50 people, or a nonprofit all day. And then also an all-day rental for $100, which is less than 50 people. And then we have the event, which is $275 for 50 or more people, a private event. And so we think those are all very, when you think about $275 for, filling up the space, it's a very, very good price. And so all of these should be looked at for increases, and we think it doesn't all have to be the same across the board. We said the $5 across the board that's the easiest way for us to do the Wi-Fi. If you're gonna use it, you're gonna use it, or you're not. And so,
Right. So could
that's
you,
fair, but we could definitely even out, or stagger the way that we adjust the prices, but it is 6 o'clock, so.
So is that 275, is that, somebody could throw a wedding there, it'd only be 275, is there an extra fee for the kitchen?
No.
It's a really good deal, do we try to promote that at all, do we do any advertising for that?
We haven't really needed to, because we're full almost every Friday, Saturday.
Okay,
it's 6 o'clock, if we can maybe motion to recess and come back to this discussion, I think that was good discussion, we can come up with more ideas after planning commission.
I'll make a motion.
second,
Motion by Commissioner Holmgren, second by Commissioner Heeman. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 3-0. We're recessed, and we will pick up planning commission here.